record. I will apologize. I need to leave about 10 minutes early today to get to an appointment on time. Lauren will take care of shutting this down, but I'm sure you'll have no problem continuing a conversation without me. We finished, unless I'm wrong, chapter 24 of Matthew. We had a lot of end of the world, scary, lots of gnashing of teeth. We can go back. I know we ended sort of without discussing a lot of that. I'm happy to go back, or we can continue on to chapter 25. Was there anything anyone wanted to go back to talk about in 24? I don't want to shortchange any of that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm trying to mute and I couldn't get my name.
Didn't understand a word.
Leslie, was that a comment or?
She's just having a
Oh, okay.
she's having a technical issue. She'll be
Okay.
back.
Going once, twice.
I'm moving on, but that's.
Unfaithful servants, end of the world, hypervigilance. All right, moving on.
Enough with calamities.
Well, I think that these 10 bridesmaids are sort of the same idea of vigilance. He's coming back and you don't know when. Luckily, this week I have my own Bible and my glasses, so I'm better equipped to lead us here. Would anyone like to read just this first parable, the 10 bridesmaids? So it looks like 1 through 13. Greg looks, he looks like he wants to volunteer.
You know, big mouth here will always do it if nobody else raises their hand.
We appreciate it. Go ahead, please.
Okay. The reign of God can be likened to 10 bridesmaids who took their torches and went out to welcome the groom. 5 of them were foolish, while the other 5 were sensible. The foolish ones, in taking their torches, brought no oil along, but the sensible ones took flasks of oil, as well as their torches. The groom delayed his coming, so they all began to nod, then to fall asleep. At midnight, someone shouted, "The groom is here! Come out and greet him." At the outcry, all the virgins woke up and got their torches ready. The foolish ones said to the sensible, "Give us some of your oil. Our torches are going out." But the sensible ones replied, "No, there may not be enough for you and us. You had better go to the dealers and buy yourselves some." While they went off to buy it, the groom arrived, and the ones who were ready went into the wedding with him. Then the door was barred. Later, the other bridesmaids came back. "Master, master," they cried, "open the door for us." But he answered, "I tell you, I do not know you." The moral is, keep your eyes open, for you know not the day or the hour. So here's my question.
Yes.
What kind of a wedding happens at midnight? They were all falling asleep and then the wedding started.
Yes.
I'm in Georgia. It could be a shotgun.
Oh,
How funny.
Yeah, someone had to go bring that reluctant bridegroom. Yeah.
Oh,
and you know,
Was it-
then also with this theme that we've talked about in several different scenarios, the groom is getting all of this hoo-ha,
Mhm.
all of this fanfare and all
Yes.
that. It's all about the men.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting how culturally that was kind of an embedded ritual.
Yeah. I mean, still sort of.
A gift from God.
well, no, in our culture that's flipped, but I think it's more about centered on the bride. But the point of this parable is that Jesus is the bride, or the bride, the bridegroom. And
Right.
so these parables are all about getting ready for Jesus' return. And the problem is, at the time Matthew's written, it's written quite a bit later, the generation that was alive when Jesus was alive, they're beginning to die off. They're beginning to go away. And they were fully expecting that Jesus was going to come back within their lifetimes, and he hasn't.
Mhm.
So a lot of these parables have to do with the fact yes, Jesus hasn't come back. We still need to be watchful. We still need to be waiting. He's going to be, he's going to be returning at some point, and we need to be doing certain things in order to be ready for his return. Because if we don't, we're going to get surprised, and we're going to pay the penalty for that.
Yeah, it's very much like if you're not ready at that time, there's not a lot of anyone can do to help you. It's so.
I remember as a teenager kind of thinking that if I didn't have a sense of sexual ethics and what to do in certain circumstances, that I might be caught unawares. I mean, because there's all kinds of stuff happening and it's awfully easy to say yes. But so that whole idea of watchfulness, could be interpreted just as in our normal day-to-day living, and are we watching ourselves? Are we trying to abide by what we feel is right or what we know is right? Even though it's easy to veer from that.
I
And
think,
go ahead.
And
Go
I
ahead.
wonder if it's right. Yeah.
go ahead, Charity, please.
Oh, no, I was just thinking about what you had said last week about how maybe we're not going to have a left behind kind of situation where Jesus comes back to earth, but we all are going to meet him within our generation by definition. Like we are going to not be on earth anymore and meet him. And some of this, you don't know the hour or the day. You kind of don't. Tomorrow's not promised. And if this is my last day, am I good with it? And I've been thinking about it kind of like that, because you don't necessarily know you're going to have 6 months to get things in order. Like all I've got is today to do the best I can by the people and by God, I guess. But David, what were you going to say? I think you started before I did.
I agree. I think Jesus is trying to make a definite point by these, Matthew is through these parables by Jesus, that we need to, that there are big things at stake, and whether there's nothing that can be done about it at any point or whatever, but there are definitely consequences that are going to come. And we need to be prepared to realize that in some ways, if we're not part of the kingdom, we're not doing what Jesus expects us to do, there are going to be consequences at some point for us. And he's trying to put a real point on this by this constant repetition, that this is important. We need to be paying attention to what he wants us to be about. We need to be doing that, because if we're not, there are going to be consequences. Yeah. Church, or even in a wider group. But yeah.
Okay. And consequences doesn't always mean punishment either. I mean, there's always a consequence, whether you're aware of it or not. You say something, you do something, you act in such a way, there is a consequence, even if you're totally unaware of it.
Yeah.
Whether,
Equal or stronger reaction.
Right.
It's
that, you remember that popular book many years ago called The Butterfly Effect?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Every little thing that happens leads to something else. Whether we are aware of it at the time or whether we can acknowledge it, a word, an action, and sometimes those consequences are to ourselves, and we don't realize that we're piling up this crap within us as a consequence of decisions we make or how we act or treat other people or whatever.
It's funny, I think sometimes with Charity, I don't think I ever told you this. Charity and I, our kids were in Taekwondo together, so we became friends. We would sit together all the time. We've talked about churches before and religion.
Yeah.
And I think coming here and saying that you made a full-on home here, just those with our kids being together, those random conversations, while you sit for an hour, which is inconsequential, right? Like you're just sitting talking while your kids are doing something, but then coming back here and being like, it
was funny, because I was church shopping and I asked Jackie if she knew any places, and she's like, none that have a children's program really. And then she was looking for a church, a couple of years ago maybe, and she's like, and I was I
saw her name is children's minister. I was like, even in my phone, because I've called you, it says Charity FMA, in your last name, which is,
the Taekwondo.
yeah, the Taekwondo place. But
Yeah.
like I said, a seemingly random conversation, which we probably had a million, because
Yeah.
we were there a long time. But yeah, when I saw you there, I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, we're gonna be back because if Charity's there, there's something for the kids to, especially Hope and Daisy, even
Yeah.
though they're not here,
Yeah,
that age is in your mind.
right.
Mhm.
It was funny. She's like, what are you doing? I'm like, "Well, I have church shopping." That's so funny, yeah.
And I remember talking about it, I was like, this is a great,
Mm.
this fit the things we talked about, except children.
Yeah, so we're building. Go ahead, David.
I was just gonna say, I think Greg's, what he just said about, there being natural consequences to a lot of our actions, I think that's very important. I think of a lot of the biblical language that talks about God's wrath and things like that refers just to that. The fact that when we do bad things come back to us. And that's just a natural consequence. But I think beyond that, in these particular passages, I think Jesus is starting to move. These passages are moving beyond that to an eschatological, and I'll remind you, eschatological just means end times, and he's moving towards, specifically towards an end times view of things. One of the, like I've said before, is one of the major issues in the New Testament church was the fact that Jesus had promised he was going to come back. He hasn't come back. A lot of people are dying. They're trying to rationalize all that, and at the same time, they're trying to put down a written account by people that were either alive at the time or connected to people who were alive at the time, so they had a contemporary story of what Jesus was about. And so they're dealing with a lot of these things at this time. They're dealing with the concerns of why hasn't Jesus come back? And they're dealing with, and so these stories that Matthew's sharing are stories that Jesus talked about to give reassurance that, well, not necessarily reassurance, but warning that, hey, Jesus hasn't come back yet. Doesn't mean he's not going to. And we need to be ready for that. We need to be on board with his program. We need to understand the things we need to be doing in order to be ready. So.
My husband runs a sales organization, and he's always talking about maintaining a sense of urgency, like trying to keep people like wanting to close things, like just institutionally, like as a culture,
Right.
trying to maintain. And that's what I'm hearing right now is like Matthew's trying to maintain a sense of urgency. Like we've got to keep his teachings in mind. We have to keep living a Christian life. We have to stay together as a community. So that's interesting to me. Would we like to read the next bit, Parable of the Talents, which goes, it's kind of long, 14 to 30. That will give you guys lots to talk about, hopefully. Anybody? I can do it.
Oh, David, wait.
Oh, David waved. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I said I forgot I muted myself. I finally
That's good.
figured it. I got my mute on there now that my doctor called me.
Oh.
And I
So
had
would
to
you
get
like-
out.
Oh, that's
can
totally
read.
fine. Sure. So 14 to 30.
That's fine.
Wonderful. Thank you.
For it is as if a man going on a journey, summoned his slaves and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 10, 2, and to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. The one who had received the 5 talents went off at once and traded with them and made 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who had the 2 talents made 2 more talents. But the one who had received the 1 talent went off and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. Then the one who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more talents, saying, Master, you handed over to me 5 talents. See, I have made 5 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. And the one with the 2 talents also came forward, saying, Master, you handed over to me 2 talents. See, I have made 2 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. Then the one who had received the 1 talent also came forward, saying, Master, I knew that you were a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master replied, You wicked and lazy slave, you knew, did you, that I reap where I did not sow and gather where I did not scatter? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and on my return I would have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent. So take the talent from him and gave it to the one with the 10 talents. For to all those who have, more will be given, and they will have in abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. As for this worthless slave, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Oh, thank you, Leslie. I think the first thing to say is that they don't mean talent like playing the piano. They mean like a big thing of money or something very valuable, right?
Yeah.
So if you were thinking they gave you the talent to sing, that's not, would have been very confusing.
David, is a talent a specific
Coin.
amount of currency, or is it like a bunch? I mean, is not like a denarii, which is like a one thing, or is it?
It's very large, though.
Okay.
My footnote says
I have
15
a-
years,
15 years wages?
15 years wages of a
Wow.
laborer. So these are
Yeah,
iBankers.
Yeah, in an earlier parable, Jesus talked about the one servant that owed his master, I forget how many talents. It was just a joke, because that would have been like an insane amount of money. And then they compared it with this other person who used denarius. Yes, it's definitely a definite denomination of money at that time.
Okay, all right. Wow.
I think one thing we need to be careful of here is one of the thing about parables is parables are trying to bring out a specific point. You can't take every detail of a parable and make it applicable in every instance.
Mm-hmm.
For example, the trying to assume that this is how God is based on the way this master reacted. I think that's pushing it. A lot of people, in fact, I've heard some interpretations that are so strong in regard to this, disliking God painted this way. Some people interpret this this parable, not just as the talents, but as also the unjust or merciless master. So it's they look at this as not necessarily Jesus or God, but as an example of a master in the way the master should not be. Now, I'm not sure we wouldn't want to necessarily go that far. We just need to be very careful how specific we get in pointing every detail of a parable to exactly the way things are. But so that's one thing. We've already covered the fact that a talent's a huge amount of money. But the thing that strikes me with this is what was it that led to this servant's downfall? It was his fear. It was his fear of his master. It wasn't that he stole, but that he was given something and he was so afraid of his master that he didn't do anything. And I think that's what we see a lot in our world today is people are very, very fearful. They're being controlled by their fear. They really are concentrating just on themselves and their own welfare because they're afraid of what's going to happen otherwise. And I think that's very much the case in certain parts of the church, that we're being ruled by fear, and that controls us. So we're afraid to reach out. We're afraid to be, do what we can with what we have. But instead we're reacting and just being concerned about ourselves, and the fear makes us selfish. And that's not the attitude that that God wants us to have with what we're given.
Okay, well, I had the question of if this servant was so fearful of his master that it paralyzed him and he couldn't do anything with that talent, so he buried it. Why then is the master fulfilling his fear? He throws him out into the wilderness. I mean, that's so, here, you were afraid, I'll teach you to be afraid, and throws him. I mean, that's kind of what it seems like.
Yeah, the way my Bible reads is, but from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away.
Right, so it's
Well-
like if he's afraid of his master only proved that. Bye.
Keep talking.
His master has only proved that, yeah, you should have been afraid of me.
Yeah, because what you
Bye,
have, I'm
Charity.
Yeah, and I
Yes.
think this is a part of the specificity of the parable, to try to directly apply this to the way God would be. I think that's problematic in this situation. I don't think what it's trying to say is this is how God is. In fact, I think it's probably trying to say that this is not how God is. God's not like this, and we don't need to fear him, and we don't need to live our lives in fear or in fearfully, so that we're scared to take what God has given us and use it, but instead just kind of protect it, maintain it for our own welfare. It's
You know, David, I appreciate those comments because, I mean, I think everybody can attest to the fact that they have allowed fear to immobilize them, to not do things that they want to do, or to not do things that they know they should do, and to kind of internalize fear to the point where it really prevents them from becoming who they should be.
Yep.
You know,
Right.
and that's like doubling your talents, you know, if you really are actualizing yourself in a good way, then you are multiplying what you can do, not just for yourself, but for others. So there's a very practical application here that goes way beyond the literal interpretation.
Yeah, and the orientation, I think one of the most important things for me for this particular passage, this particular parable or pericope, whatever you want to call it. But anyway, is the fact that where the orientation for the different servants is. The first two servants, their orientation is, well, I'm going to do my best for the master. I'm going to do my best for him. And whereas the third servant, his orientation was, I'm going to protect myself. I'm afraid. I'm going to hold it all in, and I'm going to protect myself. So that something bad doesn't happen. I don't want to lose the money. And it's all about where you're maybe. For me, it seems one possible way of looking at it is about the orientation of who you're really working for, who you're really trying to please.
So there's my other question I was gonna ask you, David, is it would be nice, far be it from me to question Jesus' parables, but it would kind of been good to, what would have happened if one of the servants had lost all of the talent with his investment? Would the master have been just as understanding and say, you did your best and, oh, well. There's not, there's either the people that have doubled the money that he gave them, or this person that did not lose any of it. He was too afraid to do anything with it, but he still had that same amount that he was given. What would have happened if he had given money to somebody and they had lost it all?
In trying
to gain more, yeah. I mean, do you think that the master? I realize this is speculation.
I think maybe we're getting bogged down into the specificity of the parable, in the sense that we're making it all about money and investing money.
Right.
Well, this is talking about it. It's something more. And I think his point isn't, you need to take a risk, but so much that we needed to do with what we have. And if we do it in other terms rather than just money, yeah, you can lose money if you invest, if the market goes bad or whatever the crops go, whatever you do, you can lose that. But I think the point isn't so much whether they were successful or not, but the point is what their orientation was and what they tried to do. Because what Jesus, we're going to find out quite soon now what Jesus means by being ready, what he expects us to do. And what he expects us to do is not necessarily to be financially successful or be results oriented. What we're supposed to be oriented towards is effort oriented and kingdom oriented, using the principles and the priorities of the kingdom rather than the value system of this world. And so, yeah, so sometimes these parables can be difficult because, where do you draw the line? If you take a look at the big picture and the overall message of the parable, I think we can get some good information. But when we start applying every single detail, I think that we can really get in the weeds and really learn some bad lessons, actually. But that's just my opinion. I'm not a
Because it's
fundamental.
also not actually about money.
The word talents, that specifically does refer to money because that's what's being used as the example here. But I think
That's what
the broader lesson, you're right, Dawn, it's not just about money. It's about all our resources, everything we have. Yeah. So, yeah.
Maybe specifically our talents, although, they are talking about money, but putting ourselves out there and using our talents.
I was thinking
to
that
better
too.
it.
Maybe it's the point that God gives us all talents.
Right.
And we shouldn't, waste an opportunity to try and develop them just because we're afraid.
Right.
And,
And go ahead, please, Greg.
Well, I was just going to say, when I used to have heart-to-heart talks occasionally with students of mine, I would try to impress upon them that you probably don't understand this, but if you decide to blow off your homework, if you decide to cut classes, you're really making decisions for your future. You're not just deciding about this that's happening right now, because there will be a consequence, using that same word. And they would look at me like, well, I've never thought of that before, but and that's so true of all of our thoughts and actions. We might decide I want this now, and then not realizing what that's going to mean for something that happens later.
And in this particular parable, I think we need to be careful not to get affected and begin to see as the increase is what the master was after. That people, that the fact that they were successful, fact that they were profitable was what the master was after. He was after their best efforts, because I think we're going to see in this next section that the efforts that Jesus is expecting are not efforts that are going to gain you a lot of money. In fact, they're efforts that we are involved in investing in people and giving away and those kind of things. So yeah.
I think when somebody
go ahead, please, Jackie.
specifically at Grace recently, we have people like Carol, or maybe you guys have done it, I don't know, put themselves out there and do the church service, right? That's your talent. But what it does is build self-confidence in others to say, I'll do that. So you get increased in your confidence by being able to do it, but yet it gives other people confidence to try to put them. We're doing it next week. Mike is not thrilled with my volunteering him. But
Tell him that my thought process when I was approached and asked to do it is that I'm not worthy. I don't, but.
Speak louder. I can't hear you from the back of the church.
But I thought, what more accepting, comfortable place to do this? Nobody was gonna say anything bad to me because they all are accepting of whatever my thoughts are. So I felt
Right.
like this is a good place to try my public speaking because everybody here is willing to listen to what I have to say and not be real, critical of what I'm doing.
And isn't it funny how we can be sitting around a table having a discussion and giving our opinions and speaking and whatnot, but the minute we have to stand up in front of the same people, it's like, oh my God, I'm quaking inside.
Repeating the
But
exact same.
I read for the first time last week.
Uh,
Was it last week or the week before? That was the first time I had read.
That's
Broad.
great.
And yeah, I was confident enough in this group to be able to do that.
yeah,
Yeah.
All these years.
yeah.
That's something I hadn't thought about, Jackie, and I like that, the fact that our willingness not only is, shows our willingness, but it can inspire other people to be willing as well. That's a good
Right.
point. I think
Yeah.
And,
that's a
and our
good thing to take
trust.
away. Yes.
Isn't
Our
that the
trust
job to lift
being
everybody
used.
up?
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
Well,
think that's-
in Charity's absence, since it's 1 minute to 11:30, this next is kind of long.
And then, no, let's not try to.
No, let's
attend
do it.
this,
No,
no.
not with what's coming up next.
Right. So let's go in peace to love and serve the Lord.
Oh, thanks be to God.
Amen.
Okay.
Amen.
In the name of Jesus, amen.
So Susan Walker, I may not be at EFM tonight. I'm gonna call Karen and tell her, but
Uh-oh.
I just am letting you know too.
Bye,
You're-
everybody. We'll see
Bye.
you.
Yeah, I won't be there either.
Bye, Dave.
Oh, okay.
Bye, Mom.
I don't feel so bad.
Tisk, tisk, stitch it
So
cool.
Karen's gonna